Welcome back to another explainer, folks. I am so thrilled you're here today because we are jumping straight into one of the most captivating, deeply debated mysteries in all of gaming lore. We're stepping back into the cold, desolate, and heavily guarded realm of Dark Souls to try and unravel the secrets of a character who has quite literally puzzled the lore community for years. Okay, let's dive into this. Who exactly is Crossbreed Priscilla? I mean, picture this. You've got this towering, stark white, half-dragon entity gripping a massive scythe. And she's completely isolated from the rest of the game's universe, locked away inside a literal painting. It's wild. But why is she there? Who put her there? And honestly, the question that sparks the fiercest debates of all, where did she even come from? Part 1. The Peculiar Doll. Now, before we can even ask who she is, we have to talk about how you even find her. Because in Dark Souls, you don't just accidentally stumble into her domain. No way. You have to hunt down a very specific, deeply tragic key item. Just listen to the description for the Peculiar Doll. There once was an abomination who had no place in this world. She clutched this doll tightly and eventually was drawn into a cold and lonely painted world. That is so chilling, right? It immediately sets this dark, incredibly lonely tone. The gods didn't just exile her, they labeled her an absolute abomination. And this little doll was literally the only comfort she had. And getting your hands on this doll? It's an incredibly convoluted journey. First, you've got to figure out how to return to the undead asylum. Then, you have to fight your way all the way back to the exact prison cell you woke up in, which, by the way, is now guarded by a highly lethal Black Knight. Only after grabbing the doll can you travel to Anor Londo, the city of the gods, and finally interact with that massive painting hanging in the cathedral. It's almost as if the creators wanted her hidden away forever, burying her behind layers of retraced steps and obscure secrets. All right, Part 2, Surviving the Painted World. So you get sucked into the canvas, and you arrive in the snowy, ruined landscape of the Painted World of Ariamis. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when you finally survive the trek to her tower. She just gives you the option to leave. She tells you, this land is peaceful, its inhabitants kind. The sheer dark irony of that claim is just astounding. Because if you've played this sequence, you know her statement could not be further from the truth. Contrast her peaceful claims with the horrifying reality of these so-called kind inhabitants. First, you've got engorged zombies with these massive tumorous growths that explode into lethal toxic clouds the second they die. Then there's the infamous bone wheel skeletons. They hide in pitch-black wells and just relentlessly stun-lock you into oblivion. And let's not forget the crow demons raining down from above with vicious jumping grab attacks. It is a brutal, punishing landscape specifically designed to trap you. Oh, and we absolutely can't forget the number 13. That is the exact number of slow-moving, spear-wielding phalanx enemies guarding the central courtyard statue. As lore hunters have pointed out, these guys are a brilliant direct callback to the developer's previous game, Demon's Souls. The whole Painted World acts like this giant dumping ground. It's a containment zone for scrapped ideas, lethal enemies, and exiled abominations that the gods just wanted to brush under the rug and completely forget about. Which brings us to Part 3, the parentage mystery. This all builds up to the absolute greatest debate in the community. If Priscilla is a half-dragon crossbreed, who in the world are her parents? Fans have spent years tearing through item descriptions trying to solve this. So let's impartially lay out the two big conflicting theories. One major camp believes she's the daughter of Gwyn's firstborn, the Nameless King, and his Stormdrake. The other side passionately argues that her parents are the dragons Seath, the Scaleless, and Velka, the goddess of sin. Let's look at the Nameless King theory first. We know the king was erased from the annals of history for his foolishness in allying with the ancient dragons. Now, lore hunters will tell you that foolishness is a classic literary trope for falling in love with the enemy. Plus, Priscilla and the king both wield these huge, long-reaching weapons, a scythe and a spear. The Nameless King has that stark white hair, exactly like Priscilla, and his soul description explicitly mentions a deep bond with his Stormdrake. Could that bond have resulted in a child, triggering his banishment and her imprisonment? It makes a lot of sense. But then we have the opposing theory, and it is just as strong. What if her parents are Seath the Scaleless and the rogue goddess Velka? Well, Velka is deeply associated with crows, and the Painted World is absolutely infested with those crow demons we talked about. Priscilla wields a Lifehunt scythe, an occult-like weapon feared by the gods, which aligns perfectly with Velka's domain as the goddess of sin. On top of that, Velka's talisman is completely unique because it scales with intelligence, the magic stat directly tied to the dragon's seath. Add in the fact that Velka's rapier and armor set are exclusively found inside the Painted World, and you've got a wildly compelling case. It just perfectly illustrates how deep the environmental storytelling goes here.
Part 4. Seath's Sinister Experiments.
Actually, scratch that. What if assuming biological parentage is a mistake entirely? Think about the word crossbreed. In our world, sure, it implies natural reproduction. But in the context of Dark Souls, and specifically when dealing with Seath the Scaleless, crossbreed is way more likely to mean a magical, horrific DNA experiment. Because we already have established lore proving that Seath had a habit of kidnapping maidens from across the land. He dragged them to his massive archives and used twisted magic to mutate them, creating nightmare monstrosities like the serpentine Pasakas you fight later on. So it is highly probable that Priscilla isn't the product of some tragic romance at all. She might actually be a test tube-style magical experiment, created by channeling raw dragon essence into a kidnapped human subject. So, the crucial point is right here in the description of her soul. The gods didn't just lock her away because she looked a little weird. Her soul reads, "This crossbreed bastard child and antithesis to all life." Antithesis to all life. That is intense. She possessed the Lifehunt ability, which was quite literally a power capable of killing gods. So whether she was born of a forbidden romance by the Nameless King or stitched together in Seath's magical laboratories, she was a supreme threat. They locked her in that painting not to protect her, but to protect themselves from her immense power. And finally, Part 5, the cut main character. Now, we've talked about the lore, the enemies, and the theories, but we absolutely have to talk about the meta history of the game's development, because this is a massive revelation. If you dig into the cut content archives, you'll find that Crossbreed Priscilla was originally designed to be the main character of Dark Souls. Long before she was an optional exiled boss hidden inside a painting, the developers intended for her to be the actual heroine that you, the player, would control. But when her design didn't quite fit the final vision of an armor-wearing undead protagonist, they couldn't bear to just scrap her. So the story goes that they created the Painted World almost entirely to give her a home in the final release.
So what does this all mean? I want to leave you with this final massive what if. How would the entire Dark Souls universe have changed if this exiled abomination was actually the hero? Imagine traversing Lordran not as a cursed undead, but as a feared, god-killing crossbreed. It completely reframes how we view her, just standing silently in that snowy tower, holding her peculiar doll. I really hope this explainer helped you see the brilliant, tragic layers behind one of gaming's greatest mysteries. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the details, and I will catch you in the next explainer.